Hi, this is Garrett coming at you with another episode of Produce Your Freedom in our reloading series here. Wanted to start off with just a couple quick little disclaimers. First of all, I don't take any responsibility um, for anyone who does any reloading unsafely or improperly or anything like that. We're not going to go into putting any potentially explosive components into the rounds yet today. We're just going to talk a little bit about setting up the dies on a hand press that I have, as well as depriming cases that have been successfully fired. Certainly depriming case and sizing it, which all happen in one step here. So without further ado, I'll get into the equipment being used. Okay, as mentioned before, I seriously think if you want to get into reloading, you should read some good books, get some good reloading manuals, and fully understand what you're getting into and what you're doing before you start taking any of these steps. But I am an apartment dweller, so I have a pretty small setup here. So we're going to be using the Lee Breech Lock hand press. You can see right there. It's just kind of operated by a rod and lever system. Manually, you don't mount it to a bench or anything like that, which is great for me. I don't have a permanent workbench in here I could mount it to. Along the same lines, I have a set of Lee dies. There's your Lee Deluxe pistol die set for 9mm. It is the 4-die set. There is a 3-die set as well. It's a carbide die set. The difference between the 3-die and 4-die set by Lee being the 4th die is a crimp die. In the 3-die set, the bullet seating and crimping happen at the same time, and from some of the things I have read, you may have a little bit of difficulty with that if the timing isn't set up right. It can deform your cases a little bit, so I figured just keep it in the 4 steps. It was only a few bucks more. I got all this stuff right off of Amazon, by the way. You can find all of this there. I might put some links in the show notes just to kind of show you exactly what all these things are if you're interested. There's a Lee Ram Prime. This wasn't purchased separately. It came with one of these two. I don't recall which. It's a funnel for powder. I believe all this extra stuff came with the die set itself. Lee's brand of case lubricant for when you resize, which in their manual of course they recommend their own case lubricant, but one of the things that they did mention is that some of the other lubricants can contaminate powder and primers because they're oil based, and they can have some detrimental effects if you're not careful. Apparently the Lee lubricant is cheaper and doesn't have as many problems with that. So I'm just using what came with it for now, and I don't really see a reason to try something other than that. The Lee equipment is certainly going to leave me with reloaded brass by the end of all this series in this whole process. So there's that. I have just some regular old Q-tips to help lubricate the cases. Here's a half-spent box of ammunition, as well as the cases themselves. Spent ones, I actually have lubricated the outside a little bit. I might have overdone a few of them, but I'm not worried about that. I could always wipe them off after. So let's get into how to set up the press, and then I'll just kind of go right in the order of the instruction steps that Lee has given us. Show you the setup of the press briefly, and then what I did to lubricate the cases so far. Then we'll finish up, lubricate a few more, and show you the actual depriming and sizing process. Alright, so here's the press itself. The first step it gives you is to put the shell holder in place. The shell holder is this little thing that comes right in the middle of the case. It's pretty shallow. Does exactly what it says. It just holds the rimmed cartridge. I'm sorry, not necessarily rimmed, it just holds the cartridge in there. And all you do is slide it on. There's kind of like a little, can't quite see it in here, but there's a little band around here that applies tension to the inside here. Of course, make it so that you can feed your cartridges in so that the opening is in front of you, not facing back towards the metal here. And then step 2 would be to install the carbide sizing die and decapping die right here. So I've already done that and seated it to the right depth, but there's a step in the instruction here that's definitely worth noting. So basically you have this big nut right here that can wind up and down to get the depth seated correctly. With the carbide die, you want it so that it makes contact. There's no space here between the lever and the press, and so that it makes contact with the shell holder that you've put in place. So make sure you do that in the right order. Once you have that in, you simply twist down that nut on the top I was pointing to before. So you kind of set this depth first, then set this as needed so it doesn't go anywhere and you maintain the correct depth. So now that die is in there. I know I didn't exactly show you that, but we will go to lubricating the cases in just a second. Alright, so in terms of lubricating the cases, this tube, you kind of have to poke a hole in the top. Just did that with a pocket knife. I would squirt a little out onto my fingertips, just as they recommended, and just kind of massage it around here, looking for a really thin film, so you'll feel it's a little slicker than when you started, but really not much difference. I did that to 20 rounds over here. I did 20 rounds because in this particular press, every 20 cases, I should say, you have to remove the shell holder die and empty the primers that have fallen below it. That's just what the capacity is for how many spent primers are going to fit within that. So I did 20 to start with, and that should be plenty to show you, of course. So I've done that step. What I haven't done is lubricated the inside, which they recommend doing with a cotton swab. And we have those right here. I'm going to do the same thing, just squirt a little bit onto it, run it around the edge of each case, trying not to build up too much excess. Again, it should be a thin coating, not a thick paste that you can really see in there. This is 9mm, so the Q-tip fits in pretty easily. I imagine if you had some neck down rifle cases and stuff, might be a little bit of squeeze, but it looks like it should still work for the most part. You might have to find some really thin Q-tips, depending on how long and how narrow the opening on your cases are. So I'm going to do a few of these. I don't think we need to watch that. I'd have trouble holding the camera, or the iPhone rather, and doing that. So I'm just going to lubricate a few and then put them on the press and run it for you. Alright, I'm back. I've changed to a different table. I'm now at my kitchen table. The cases have been lubricated inside and out with just your regular Q-tips. I did a few cases with each end before it did get a little dirty, so I went through a few Q-tips here. Quick observation that I missed before: as I was lubricating the outside with my fingers, I was checking for any splits, cracks, separating anywhere on the case. The other thing I have been doing is checking the head stamp, of course, as well, to make sure it's all correct and I'm not putting a piece of 380 or something in there. As well as I like to do the same make at the same time. Generally, I shoot mostly just Blazer, and then I reuse those cases, so I just try and make it as consistent as possible. Usually it just means I have to check out a few that came from someone else at the range. So if you don't know what a bad case looks like, you may want to Google that, get a reloading manual, etc. I'm satisfied with all these. I wouldn't use anything that was really crunched down. I mean, it's just one piece of brass. You can probably have a zillion of them that aren't crushed or deformed. Reason being, when we fold something and then pull it back to shape, we weaken it. That's the same reason we don't use brass more than a couple times, and that the more you use it, the weaker the metal gets. It's because it is expanded in the chamber a little bit, and then you've resized it, and you've done that a couple times, and the metal weakens. These are all only been fired once. They're factory new rounds, so a high degree of confidence to start with, and then everything looks fine to me. I'll use an example of a couple that are somewhat flattened just to show you the press and show you the resizing. This might be tough to see, but there's kind of a flat side of it over here. So that's one of the ones I'll use, and then this is what, of course, a fully round one would look like. I have done 20 of these rounds in terms of lubricating. That's all the shell holder will hold when this gets deprimed. So there's a little spot down here where the primers are going to fall into. So that's what I've done. I'm doing them in batches of 20 just to make it easy to keep track of when I have to empty that thing. I mentioned I am doing it at my table. This is, you know, where we get into the stuff in the primers is kind of gross and toxic. So I am doing it on just a little plastic plate as well, and I'll wipe my table down after, wash my hands. I also am wearing glasses, which is a good little safety step, particularly when you get into the explosive end, but you know, I have something over my eyes anyways. So let's get into it. It's a pretty straightforward operation. What this is designed to do is to be used while seated in a chair or couch or something with some sort of something with an arm on it. For a righty, you would hold the press itself in your left hand, and you'd end up working the lever with your right, but really what they have in mind is you work it against your leg, right? So you stick your case in, you know, your leg would be down here, so I wouldn't need my hand to support it. You'd close it, you know, put a finger on it or stick it under your other leg to open it back up. You know, you're righty, so you're going to feed the cases with your right hand. So this piece, as it occurs, as we close the press, this little rod is going to knock the primer down into this space under the shell holder right here. The case is also going to recess up into the sizing die here, and in that round with the flat spot, we'll see that will pull that right out. So it's pretty straightforward. Here's a normal round that isn't too flattened or deformed. Doing this vertically just for your benefit rather than horizontally the way you'd want to do it if you're trying to be efficient. Okay, primer's gone and it's fairly circular. There's one. This one is the one with the flat spot. Again, on the right side of the case. Stick it in. I'll try and do this one a little slower so you can kind of see what's going on. It's being recessed. It's being recessed. That's about where you'll feel the tension, which makes sense. That's where it's actually working on correcting the size of the case. That's where you're going to feel the most pressure. But it's not difficult. I'm not trying to make it look that way. It requires very little pressure. And now hopefully you can see that that flat spot is gone. It probably looks no different than this one, right? If I flipped them around a couple times in my hands, you likely would not be able to tell me which was which is the idea there, of course. So we would do that 18 more times. We'd have all our brass. I just wanted to close with a few notes on efficiency and safety with this process. So even if you have the quick die change, you're probably going to want to set up your process so you do one step to a large number of rounds, and then move on to your next die and your next die and your next die. It's, you know, not conducive to doing small batches, because you have to do a small batch, change the die, do it again, do it again, do it again. So this is the first step. After that, the next steps would be you'd have to seat a primer into it, fill it with powder, insert a bullet to the correct depth, and crimp. That's the whole rest. After that, you have a round, and then I would just wipe them down just because of the lubricant, just to make them look nice. I do a lot of this with a rag or something underneath it. I'm going to wipe down the table after. In terms of safety, always follow the directions to a T. That's what I've done here, is I've followed the directions that came with the press. I haven't gone into the actual loading of primers and powder yet, and the bullet itself. When I do that, I will go off the load data that was sent with the dies. They give you a handful of different loads, different powders and things, I believe, different bullet weights. Always, always, always start with the low end there. Do not start with the high end, start with the low end. Make sure it works fine in your firearm, make sure you've done everything alright, and then work your way up from there. Don't go below their recommendation. Don't substitute anything that doesn't create a then published load, especially if you're new to this. And if you have any doubts about any of what you're doing, just stop and try to get some help from someone who has been doing this a while, or go back to the manufacturer's literature or a reloading book, etc., just to make sure you're not doing anything unsafe. This is primers, gunpowder, bullets. I mean, this is dangerous stuff, and really what we're talking about here is saving a couple bucks for the most part. Some people do this to be able to work up, a really nice load that works particularly well in their firearm. I'm doing this mostly as a hobby. I also, I kind of find it a little bit therapeutic to just kind of sit down and just work out a bunch of rounds. So wear safety glasses, do everything safely. When you go into the phase of primer and powder and all that, you're going to want a well-ventilated area, particularly. At that point, I will not be doing it in this apartment. More than likely, I will be doing it at my father has a shop at his house, a workshop, and he has a ventilation system for the sawdust and stuff like that. It's a bigger area. I'll be definitely be using that area and opening some windows and stuff. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Feel free to comment and all that good stuff. I'm by no means an expert in this. I just want to show you how simple it can be. And it doesn't take much to get started into this hobby, and you can always kind of go piece by piece by piece. I'm starting with this simple press. I don't have any, fancy Dillon, whatever, 650 or something like that, and really you don't need to initially. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day, and remember, produce your freedom or life will produce your chains.